The silence that followed the gunshots was more terrifying than the noise itself. As Sarah Greene clutched her infant son tighter to her chest, praying the raiders wouldn't find their hiding place beneath the floorboards of her now burning homestead. Texas, 1875. The unforgiving summer heat had given way to a cooler September evening when a band of outlaws had descended upon the small ranch Sarah had built with her late husband. Thomas had been dead nearly 8 months now, taken by pneumonia during the harsh winter, leaving her alone with their 3-month-old son, James. The thundering of hooves faded into the distance as Sarah waited, counting her heartbeats until she felt certain the danger had passed. With trembling hands, she pushed up on the trapdoor, her eyes stinging from smoke and tears as she surveyed what remained of her home. The main room was in shambles, furniture overturned, their few possessions scattered. Flames licked at the eastern wall, threatening to engulf the entire structure. Sarah didn't hesitate. With James bundled securely against her chest, she grabbed the small bag of emergency supplies she'd kept hidden, some money, a change of clothes for them both, and Thomas's pistol. The night air hit her like a blessing as she stumbled out into the yard, watching helplessly as the flames consumed what had been her life for the past 2 years. "There's nothing for us here now, James," she whispered to her sleeping child, her voice breaking. "We have to go." With only the clothes on her back, her meager supplies, and her precious child, Sarah Greene began walking west toward the town of Willow Creek. It was 15 miles away, a daunting journey on foot with an infant, but she had no choice. Thomas had always spoken highly of a friend there, a ranch owner named Miller who might help them. The journey proved more difficult than she had imagined. By dawn, Sarah's feet were blistered and bleeding, her arms aching from carrying James, who had begun to fuss with hunger. She had managed to feed him twice during the night, stopping briefly to rest against a tree, but her own stomach had been empty for nearly 24 hours. "Just a little farther, my love," she encouraged, though her body trembled with exhaustion. The rising sun illuminated rolling hills dotted with scrubby trees and patches of tall grass. In the distance, she could make out what appeared to be a ranch, a modest house with a large barn and several outbuildings. Hope flared within her. Perhaps whoever lived there would allow her to rest, maybe even provide some food before she continued to Willow Creek. As Sarah approached the property, she noted the well-maintained fences, the healthy-looking cattle grazing in the distance. This was no struggling homestead, but a proper working ranch. Still, she hesitated at the gate, fear of rejection warring with her desperate need for help. A bark startled her, and Sarah turned to see a large brown dog bounding toward her. She stepped back instinctively, shielding James, but the animal stopped a few feet away, tail wagging cautiously. "Rusty, heel, boy," the commanding voice came from a tall man emerging from the barn. Sarah watched as he strode toward them, his gait confident yet unhurried. He wore simple working clothes, denim pants, a cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. A gun belt hung at his hip, though his hand made no move toward the weapon. As he drew closer, Sarah could see he was younger than she had initially thought, perhaps in his early 30s, with a sun-weathered face and dark eyes that assessed her carefully. "Madam," he said, removing his hat to reveal thick brown hair. "Can I help you?" Sarah swallowed, suddenly aware of how she must appear exhausted, clothes smudged with soot, an infant in her arms. "I'm sorry to intrude. My name is Sarah Greene. Our home was attacked by raiders last night. I'm trying to reach Willow Creek, but—" Her voice faltered as a wave of dizziness swept over her. She swayed slightly, and the man moved forward with surprising speed, steadying her with a firm hand on her elbow. "Easy there," he said, his voice gentler now. "Willow Creek is still a good 10 miles from here. You look like you could use some rest and food before continuing your journey." Sarah blinked back tears of relief. "Thank you, I wouldn't ask, but my son—" "Of course," he nodded, glancing at the bundle in her arms. "I'm Nathan Jameson. This is the Pinewood Ranch. Please come inside." Nathan led her toward the house, a modest 2-story structure with a wide porch. As they approached, the door opened, and an older woman with silver-streaked black hair appeared, wiping her hands on an apron. "Nathan, who's this?" she asked, her eyes widening as she took in Sarah's appearance. "Mrs. Greene and her child need our help, Mrs. Calloway," Nathan explained. "Raiders attacked their homestead." The woman's expression immediately softened. "Good heavens, child, come in this instant." She ushered Sarah inside into a warm kitchen that smelled of fresh bread. "I'm Agnes Calloway, the housekeeper here. You sit right down. That little one needs feeding, and by the looks of it, so do you." Sarah nearly collapsed into the offered chair, the simple kindness overwhelming her. As Mrs. Calloway bustled about preparing food, Nathan stood awkwardly in the doorway, hat in hand. "Mrs. Greene, where exactly was your homestead?" he asked. "About 5 miles east of here," Sarah replied, adjusting James in her arms. "My husband and I settled there 2 years ago. He passed away this winter." Nathan's expression darkened. "These raids have been getting worse. Sheriff Thompson in Willow Creek seems powerless to stop them." He hesitated, then added, "You're welcome to stay here until you decide what to do next. We have a spare room." "I couldn't impose," Sarah began. "Nonsense," Mrs. Calloway interrupted, placing a plate of bread, cheese, and dried beef before her. "You're not imposing. Now eat something before you faint dead away." Nathan nodded in agreement. "I need to finish my morning chores, but we'll talk more later." He placed his hat back on his head and with a brief nod departed. As Sarah ate, gratitude washing over her, Mrs. Calloway explained that Nathan had inherited the ranch 3 years earlier after his uncle died. "He's a good man," she said. "Keeps to himself mostly, but fair and hardworking. Lost his parents young, then his uncle took him in. Been through his share of hardships, that one." Sarah listened, cradling James, who had fallen asleep after nursing. Despite her exhaustion, questions filled her mind. Could she trust these strangers? What would happen to her and James now that they had lost everything? The uncertainty of their future weighed heavily on her. Mrs. Calloway seemed to sense her concerns. "Don't you worry about tomorrow just yet. Today you rest. There's a bedroom upstairs with a cradle belonged to Nathan's cousin's child who visited last spring. I'll show you up after you've eaten." True to her word, the housekeeper led Sarah to a small but comfortable bedroom. The promised cradle stood in the corner, and a window overlooked the sprawling ranch lands. "Fresh towels in the chest there," Mrs. Calloway said. "Bathrooms down the hall. I'll bring up some hot water for washing." Left alone, Sarah gently placed James in the cradle, watching his peaceful sleep for a moment before allowing herself to sink onto the edge of the bed. For the first time since the attack, tears flowed freely down her cheeks, tears of relief, grief, and fear intermingled. She must have dozed off, for the next thing she knew, the room had darkened with the setting sun, and James was stirring in his cradle. Sarah quickly attended to her son, changing and feeding him before making herself presentable. The hot water Mrs. Calloway had provided was now cool, but Sarah gratefully washed away the grime of her ordeal. Downstairs, she found Nathan and Mrs. Calloway at the dinner table. The housekeeper immediately stood, taking James from her arms. "Let me hold this little angel while you eat properly," she insisted. Nathan rose as well, pulling out a chair for Sarah. "You're looking better," he observed, his voice carrying a hint of warmth that hadn't been there earlier. "Thank you," Sarah replied, taking her seat. "I cannot express my gratitude enough for your hospitality." Nathan shrugged, returning to his own chair. "Anyone would do the same." "Not everyone," Sarah said quietly, thinking of neighbors who had kept their distance after Thomas's death, offering condolences but little practical help. Dinner was a simple but hearty affair: roast beef, potatoes, and vegetables from the kitchen garden Mrs. Calloway proudly maintained. The conversation remained light, with the housekeeper doing most of the talking, regaling Sarah with stories of life on the ranch. Nathan contributed occasionally, his answers direct but not unfriendly. After the meal, Mrs. Calloway excused herself to wash the dishes, firmly refusing Sarah's offer of help. "You've had enough for one day, dear. Tomorrow you can help if you insist." Left alone with Nathan, Sarah felt a flutter of nervousness. He wasn't an imposing man in the threatening sense, but there was an intensity about him, a watchfulness in his dark eyes that suggested he missed very little. "Mrs. Greene," he began, leaning forward slightly. "I hope you don't think me forward, but I need to ask, do you have somewhere to go? Family perhaps, or friends in Willow Creek?" Sarah hesitated. "Thomas, my husband, spoke of a friend there, a Mr. Miller, but I've never met the man myself, beyond that." She trailed off, the reality of her situation hitting her anew. Nathan nodded thoughtfully. "Miller's a good man, runs the general store, but starting over alone with a child." He didn't finish the thought. "I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Jameson," Sarah said, lifting her chin slightly. A small smile touched his lips. "I don't doubt that, madam, but even the strongest among us need help sometimes." He cleared his throat. "What I'm trying to say is, you're welcome to stay here while you figure things out. The ranch could use an extra pair of hands, and Mrs. Calloway has been asking for help with the house for months." Sarah stared at him, surprise evident on her face. "You're offering me employment, room, board, and a small wage," Nathan confirmed, "at least until you decide on your next steps." The unexpected offer left Sarah momentarily speechless. It seemed too good to be true: shelter, safety, income. But she had learned long ago that things that seemed too good usually were. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" she asked directly, studying his face for any sign of ulterior motives. Nathan didn't flinch from her scrutiny. "Because I know what it is to lose everything and have to start again," he said simply, "and because good help is hard to find out here." His honesty disarmed her. After a moment's consideration, Sarah nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Jameson. I accept your offer, at least temporarily." "Nathan," he corrected, "if you're staying, you might as well use my given name." "Sarah," she returned, offering her hand. His larger one engulfed hers in a brief, firm handshake that somehow felt like more than a simple business agreement. The days that followed fell into a steady rhythm. Sarah helped Mrs. Calloway with household tasks while caring for James. The older woman proved to be a treasure trove of advice on child rearing and practical frontier knowledge, teaching Sarah skills Thomas hadn't had time to share before his death. Nathan remained somewhat distant but unfailingly polite. Sarah often saw him at mealtimes and occasionally in passing as he went about his ranch work. She learned that besides Mrs. Calloway, there were 3 ranch hands who lived in a bunkhouse near the barn: Miguel, an experienced vaquero; Hank, a middle-aged former soldier; and young Tom, barely 20 and eager to learn. A week after her arrival, Sarah was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Shading her eyes against the sun, she saw Nathan riding in with another man, both looking grim. "Sarah," Nathan called, dismounting, "this is Sheriff Thompson from Willow Creek." The sheriff, a gray-haired man with a weathered face, tipped his hat. "Madam, Mr. Jameson told me what happened to your place. I'd like to ask you some questions, if you don't mind." Sarah invited them inside, where Mrs. Calloway provided coffee. As they sat at the kitchen table, Sarah recounted the attack, the sounds of men arriving, the shots, hiding beneath the floorboards, and finally her escape as the house burned. "Did you see any of them? Recognize voices, perhaps?" Sheriff Thompson asked, pencil poised over a small notebook. Sarah shook her head. "It was dark. I only glimpsed shadows through the window before I hid," but she hesitated. "One voice did sound familiar. I couldn't place it then, but thinking back, it reminds me of a man who stopped by our farm about a month ago, asking for water for his horse. He asked a lot of questions: if I lived alone, if I had family nearby." The sheriff and Nathan exchanged looks. "Can you describe him?" Thompson asked. Tall, lean, had a scar across his left cheek, wore a black hat with a silver band. "Sounds like Jack Harden," the sheriff muttered. "Been suspecting his gang in these raids." "Harden's dangerous," Nathan said quietly. "His men killed the Petersons' last spring family over by Coyote Creek." Sarah paled, instinctively glancing toward the cradle where James napped. "Do you think they'll come here?" "Not likely," Nathan assured her. "Harden's gang hits isolated homesteads, not established ranches with hands. Too much resistance." Despite his reassuring words, Sarah noticed his jaw tightening, his hand unconsciously moving toward the gun at his hip. After the sheriff left, promising to increase patrols and investigate further, an uncomfortable silence fell between Sarah and Nathan. "I've put you in danger," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan shook his head firmly. "You've done no such thing. Hardin's gang has been a problem in these parts for over a year. If anything, you're safer here than you would be in town." His certainty should have been reassuring, but Sarah couldn't shake her unease. "Still, perhaps I should move on and go where?" Nathan interrupted, his voice sharper than she had ever heard it. When she didn't answer, his expression softened. "Sarah, running won't solve this. The best thing you can do for James is stay somewhere safe with people who can protect you both." The intensity in his gaze stirred something in Sarah, something she hadn't felt since Thomas's early courtship. Confused by her reaction, she looked away. "Thank you for your concern, Nathan. I'll stay for now." That evening, after James was settled, Sarah found herself unable to sleep. The conversation with the sheriff had brought back the terror of the attack, and every creak of the house made her heart race. Finally, she wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and crept downstairs, thinking a cup of tea might calm her nerves. She was surprised to find Nathan sitting at the kitchen table, a lamp burning low beside him, cleaning his rifle. He looked up at her entrance, setting the weapon aside. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. Sarah nodded, moving to the stove. "I was going to make some tea. Would you like some?" "Thank you," he accepted, watching as she set the kettle to boil. As they waited for the water to heat, Sarah found herself studying Nathan's hands, strong, capable hands marked with the calluses and small scars of years of ranch work. There was something reassuring about those hands, something that spoke of reliability and protection. "You're staring, Mrs. Greene," Nathan observed, a hint of amusement in his voice. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm sorry, I was just thinking about how quickly life can change," she admitted. "2 weeks ago, I had a home, plans for the future. Now everything's different." Nathan was quiet for a moment. "My father used to say life is like riding a wild horse you can hold on tight and try to steer, but sometimes all you can do is stay in the saddle and trust you'll make it through." "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was," Nathan agreed, a shadow crossing his face. "Lost him and my mother to cholera when I was 15, came to live with my uncle here afterward." Sarah's heart ached for the teenage boy he had been. "I'm sorry." Nathan shrugged, the gesture dismissing not her sympathy but the weight of old grief. "It was a long time ago. Point is, I understand what it means to have your world turned upside down. It doesn't feel like it now, but you'll find your footing again." The kettle whistled, and Sarah busied herself preparing the tea. When she placed a steaming cup before Nathan, their fingers brushed briefly, sending an unexpected warmth up her arm. She withdrew quickly, settling into her own chair with her cup clutched between both hands. "May I ask about your husband?" Nathan inquired after a moment. Sarah took a sip of tea before answering. "Thomas was a dreamer, believed we could carve out a life from that patch of land east of here. He worked so hard." Her voice cracked slightly. "The winter was harsh. He developed a cough that wouldn't go away. By the time we realized how serious it was too late. I was 7 months pregnant when he died." Nathan's expression was one of genuine sympathy. "That couldn't have been easy." "No," Sarah agreed softly, "but James gave me a reason to keep going." She paused, then added, "Thomas was a good man, but sometimes I think he didn't fully understand the realities of frontier life. He saw only the potential, not the hardships." "Many don't," Nathan observed. "That's why so many homesteads fail. It takes more than dreams to tame this land." They fell into a comfortable silence, sipping their tea. Sarah found her earlier anxiety gradually easing, replaced by a curious sense of peace in Nathan's company. When she finally returned to bed, sleep came more easily than she had expected. Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Sarah took on more responsibilities around the ranch, not content to help only with household tasks. She had managed a small farm with Thomas and knew her way around livestock and basic repairs. Nathan seemed surprised at first by her capabilities, but quickly came to appreciate her contributions. October brought cooler weather and the cattle roundup. Sarah watched from the porch as Nathan and his men worked from dawn to dusk, gathering the herd for market. The physical demands of the work were evident in the way Nathan moved each evening, the careful way he eased into his chair at dinner, the slight stiffness in his shoulders. One evening, seeing him wince as he reached for the salt, Sarah couldn't remain silent. "You're hurt." Nathan shook his head. "Just sore, through my shoulder when a steer bolted this afternoon." After dinner, Sarah heated water and prepared a compress of herbs Mrs. Calloway had taught her to use for muscle pains. She found Nathan on the porch, staring out at the darkening ranch lands. "This will help," she said, offering the compress. Nathan looked at it, then at her, something unreadable in his expression. "Thank you." Sarah hesitated, then spoke the thought that had been growing in her mind. "You've done so much for James and me. I wish I could do more in return." "You already have," Nathan replied, surprising her. When she looked confused, he continued, "This place. It was just somewhere I lived before. Now it's starting to feel like a home again." The simple statement touched her deeply. "I'm glad," she said softly. Their eyes met, and for a breathless moment, Sarah thought he might say more or perhaps even reach for her hand. Instead, he cleared his throat and looked away. "It's getting late. Good night, Sarah." "Good night, Nathan," she replied, trying to ignore the flicker of disappointment she felt as she turned to go inside. The following morning brought a flurry of activity as the cattle were prepared for the drive to the railhead in Green River, 30 miles away. Nathan would be gone for at least 5 days, along with Miguel and young Tom. Hank would remain behind to help watch over the ranch. As Nathan mounted his horse, Sarah stood nearby with James in her arms. "Safe journey," she said. Nathan looked down at her, his expression softening as his gaze moved to James, who was watching the proceedings with wide, curious eyes. "Take care of each other," he said. "Hank knows to keep an eye out for any trouble." Sarah nodded, trying to quell the inexplicable sense of loss she felt at the thought of his absence. "We'll be fine." Nathan hesitated, then reached down to touch James's cheek briefly with one finger. "He's growing fast," he observed, a smile tugging at his lips when the baby grabbed at his hand. "Too fast," Sarah agreed, her heart warming at the interaction. With a final nod, Nathan turned his horse and rode off with the herd, leaving Sarah standing in the yard until they disappeared from sight. The days without Nathan proved busier than Sarah had anticipated. A sudden autumn storm blew in, damaging part of the barn roof. Hank managed temporary repairs, but the work was made difficult by continued rain and wind. Mrs. Calloway developed a fever, leaving Sarah to manage the household entirely on her own while also caring for James and tending to the older woman. By the 4th day, Sarah was exhausted but satisfied with how she had handled the challenges. Mrs. Calloway's fever had broken, the leaks in the barn roof were under control, and she had even managed to bake fresh bread for the first time since arriving at the ranch. That evening, as she sat on the porch watching the sunset, James sleeping in her arms, Sarah realized something that both surprised and frightened her. She had come to think of this place as home. More troubling still, she had come to associate that feeling of home with Nathan himself. "This is foolish," she whispered to herself. "He's your employer, nothing more." But her heart knew better. In the weeks she had spent at Pinewood Ranch, Nathan had shown himself to be not just kind and honorable, but thoughtful and sometimes even gently humorous when his guard was down. She had caught him watching her when he thought she wouldn't notice, his dark eyes reflecting an interest that mirrored her own growing feelings. Yet neither of them had acknowledged this changing relationship. Sarah told herself it was too soon after Thomas's death, that she should focus solely on James and rebuilding their lives. Nathan, for his part, maintained a respectful distance despite their increasing comfort in each other's company. Lost in these thoughts, Sarah almost missed the sound of approaching horses. Her heart leaped at the prospect of Nathan's return, but as the riders came into view, she realized with a chill that these were not the ranch hands. 4 men, their faces partially concealed by bandanas, rode boldly into the yard. Sarah clutched James tighter, rising quickly to her feet and backing toward the door. Well, called the leader, a tall man whose voice sent a shiver of recognition through Sarah. "Looks like we found her boys." The scar on his left cheek confirmed her worst fear. Jack Hardin had found her. "What do you want?" Sarah demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. Hardin dismounted, approaching the porch with a casual air that was more frightening than overt aggression. "Just to finish what we started, Mrs. Greene, you weren't supposed to survive our little visit to your farm." "There's nothing here for you," Sarah said, backing up until she felt the door handle against her back. "That's where you're wrong," Hardin replied, his eyes cold. "You saw us, could identify us to the sheriff." "Can't have that now, can we?" The door suddenly opened behind Sarah and Hank appeared, shotgun in hand. "Step back, Hardin," he ordered. "The lady doesn't want company." Hardin's hand moved to his pistol, but he didn't draw. 4 against 1, old man, those ain't good odds." "Maybe not," Hank agreed grimly, "but I'll take at least 2 of you with me. Want to see which 2? A tense standoff followed, broken by James beginning to cry. The sound seemed to irritate Hardin, whose lip curled in disgust. "Fine, we'll leave for now, but this isn't over." His eyes fixed on Sarah. "We'll be back when Jameson returns. Have some unfinished business with him anyway." With that ominous promise, the outlaws rode away, leaving Sarah trembling with fear and confusion. What did Hardin mean about unfinished business with Nathan? "Get inside and lock the doors," Hank instructed. "I'll keep watch tonight." Sarah obeyed, her mind racing. As she calmed James, she asked, "What did he mean about Nathan?" Hank hesitated, then sighed. "Not my place to say, but seeing as you're in danger now, Hardin and Nathan have history." Hardin's gang killed Nathan's wife and daughter 3 years ago. The revelation stunned Sarah. His wife, daughter. She had never imagined Nathan as a family man, though it explained the sadness she sometimes glimpsed in his eyes. "Emily was her name," Hank continued quietly. "Sweet woman. Their girl, Lily, was just 4. They were traveling to visit Emily's sister when Hardin's gang attacked their wagon. Nathan was checking fence lines miles away when it happened." Sarah sank into a chair, cradling James close. "That's why he took me in," she whispered, a wave of disappointment washing over her. "He saw me as another victim to protect." "Maybe at first," Hank acknowledged, "but I've worked for Nathan for 5 years. Never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you and that boy." Before Sarah could process this, they heard more hoofbeats outside. Hank moved to the window, then relaxed. "It's Nathan and the boys," he announced. "They're back early." Sarah's relief was immediately followed by anxiety. How would she face Nathan now, knowing what she knew? And how would he react when he learned Hardin had found her? The door opened, and Nathan strode in, his expression weary but satisfied until he saw their faces. "What's happened?" he demanded, instantly alert. Hank explained Hardin's visit while Nathan's expression grew increasingly grim. When the older man finished, Nathan turned to Sarah. "Are you and James all right?" he asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. "We're fine," Sarah assured him. "But Nathan," Hardin said, "he has unfinished business with you. Hank told me about your family." Pain flashed across Nathan's face before he masked it. "That wasn't Hank's story to tell," he said, his voice cold. "You should have told me," Sarah countered, her own emotions rising. "If I had known you were involved with these men," "Involved," Nathan interrupted, his eyes narrowing. "Is that what you think? That I have some connection to the men who murdered my wife and child?" Sarah realized her poor choice of words. "No, of course not. I meant that I should have known about your history with them, that they might come here because of it." Nathan's anger deflated slightly. "I didn't think they would. Hardin's been avoiding me for years." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I should never have brought you here. I've put you in danger." "No," Sarah said firmly, rising to face him. "You saved us, and now we need to decide what to do next." Nathan's expression softened as he looked at her, standing resolute with James in her arms. "You're right," he conceded. "First thing tomorrow, I'll take you and James to Willow Creek. You'll be safer there while I deal with Hardin." "Deal with him? You mean go after him?" Sarah asked, alarmed. "That's exactly what he wants. He's trying to draw you out." "I don't have a choice," Nathan replied grimly. "He won't stop coming after what he wants, and apparently that now includes you." "There's always a choice," Sarah insisted. "We could go to the sheriff, organize the ranchers in the area. I've tried that route before, Nathan cut her off. Thompson is a good man but outmatched, and the ranchers are too scattered, too slow to mobilize. Their argument was interrupted by Mrs. Calloway, who had come downstairs during the commotion. Whatever you decide, it won't happen tonight, she said pragmatically. You all need rest. Things will look clearer in the morning. Despite the tension between them, Sarah knew the housekeeper was right. They retired to their rooms, though Sarah doubted any of them would sleep much. She certainly didn't, spending most of the night alternating between watching over James and staring out the window at the moonlit ranch lands, wondering how her life had become so complicated. Morning brought no easy solutions. Nathan was still determined to take Sarah and James to town, while she remained equally convinced that confronting Hardin directly was a mistake. As they prepared to leave, loading supplies into the wagon, Sarah made one final attempt to reason with him. Nathan, please, going after Hardin alone is suicide. Nathan secured the last bag, then turned to face her. I'm not going after him immediately. First, I'll make sure you and James are safe. And then what? You ride out alone to face 4 armed men. Sarah shook her head, fighting back tears of frustration. I've already lost one husband to circumstances I couldn't control. I won't stand by and watch you throw your life away. The words hung between them, her unintended confession making Nathan go still. Sarah, he said softly, I'm not your husband. No, she agreed, her voice barely audible, but you could be. Nathan's eyes widened, and for a moment he seemed at a loss for words. Then his expression changed, growing tender in a way she had only glimpsed before. Slowly he reached out, his hand cupping her cheek. Is that what you want? He asked. Before Sarah could answer, a shot rang out, the bullet splintering the wood of the wagon inches from Nathan's head. Instantly, he pulled Sarah down, shielding her and James with his body as more gunfire erupted. Inside, he shouted, and they scrambled for the house, bullets kicking up dirt around them. They burst through the door to find Hank already at a window, returning fire. Mrs. Calloway huddled in the kitchen, clutching a rifle of her own. Miguel and Tom were nowhere to be seen. Miguel's circling around back, Hank explained between shots. Tom's in the barn with a clear view of their position. Nathan guided Sarah to the center of the house, away from windows. Stay here, he instructed, checking his pistol. If anything happens to me, take the hidden trapdoor in the pantry. It leads to a root cellar with an exit behind the woodshed. Nathan, Sarah began, but he cut her off with a swift, unexpected kiss that left her breathless. We'll finish that conversation later, he promised, his eyes intense. For now, keep James safe. With that, he moved to join Hank at the window, leaving Sarah clutching her son, her heart pounding with fear and the lingering warmth of Nathan's kiss. The gunfight lasted an eternity, or so it seemed to Sarah as she huddled in the kitchen, trying to keep James calm amid the terrifying noise. She could hear shouted orders, the crash of breaking glass, and the constant crack of gunfire. Twice bullets punched through the walls of the house, sending splinters flying. Then suddenly the shooting stopped. The silence that followed was almost more frightening than the battle had been. Sarah, Nathan's voice called from the front room, it's over. She rushed forward, James held tight against her chest, to find Nathan standing in the doorway, blood seeping from a gash on his forehead but otherwise unharmed. Outside she could see 2 bodies lying motionless in the yard. Hardin, she asked, her voice shaking. Got away with one of his men, Nathan replied grimly, but they won't get far. Miguel winged Hardin pretty good. Sarah's relief at Nathan's survival quickly gave way to renewed fear. They'll be back. Not if we find them first, Nathan said, his expression determined. Hank and I will track them. Tom will stay here with you and Mrs. Calloway. Sarah wanted to protest, to beg him not to go, but the resolute look in his eyes told her it would be futile. Instead, she asked, when will you leave? As soon as I clean up this cut, Nathan answered, touching his forehead gingerly. We need to move while the trail is fresh, Mrs. Calloway brought bandages and water, and Sarah gently cleaned the wound, trying to memorize every line of Nathan's face as she worked, terrified this might be the last time she saw him alive. You'll come back, she said, making it a statement rather than a question. Nathan caught her hand as she finished bandaging his head. "I will," he promised. "We have a conversation to finish." An hour later, Nathan and Hank rode out, following the blood trail Hardin had left behind. Sarah watched from the porch, James in her arms, until they disappeared from sight. Then, refusing to give in to fear, she turned back to the house. There was work to be done, windows to board up, blood to clean from the porch, meals to prepare for Tom and Miguel, who remained on guard. The day passed slowly, each hour stretching endlessly as Sarah tried to keep busy. Mrs. Calloway, despite her recent illness, was a tower of strength, maintaining a calm demeanor that helped steady Sarah's nerves. As evening approached with no sign of Nathan and Hank, Sarah put James to bed, singing softly to him until he drifted off. Afterward, she found herself drawn to Nathan's room. She had never entered it before, respecting his privacy, but now she needed some connection to him, some reassurance. The room was spartanly furnished but meticulously neat. A photograph on the dresser caught her eye, a pretty dark-haired woman holding a small girl with Nathan's eyes. Emily and Lily. Sarah's heart ached for the family he had lost, understanding now the depth of his need for vengeance against Hardin. "He keeps that picture to remind him, Mrs. Calloway said from the doorway, making Sarah start guiltily. "Not of what he lost, though that's part of it, but of why he needs to keep living." "I shouldn't be in here," Sarah apologized, moving toward the door. Mrs. Calloway shook her head. "I think he'd want you here now." "I've watched him these past weeks, Sarah. He's coming back to life because of you and that boy of yours." "If he comes back at all," Sarah whispered, voicing her deepest fear, "he'll come back," the older woman said firmly. "That man has something to live for now." They were interrupted by the sound of a horse approaching at a gallop. Sarah rushed downstairs to find Tom already at the door, rifle ready. "It's Hank," he announced with relief, opening the door. The older ranch hand stumbled in, his face pale with exhaustion. "We found them," he reported. "Holed up in an old line shack about 10 miles west of here." "And Nathan?" Sarah demanded, her heart in her throat. "He's fine," Hank assured her. "Sent me back to get Miguel and more ammunition. We've got Hardin cornered, but he's desperate, won't come easy." "I'm coming with you," Sarah decided suddenly. Hank stared at her in disbelief. "No, madam, that's not happening. Nathan would have my hide." "I don't care," Sarah replied, her mind made up. "Mrs. Calloway can watch James. I won't sit here waiting any longer." "It's too dangerous," Hank began, but Sarah cut him off. "My husband is out there risking his life," she said, the word husband slipping out unconsciously. "I'm coming." Something in her tone must have convinced Hank of her determination, for after a moment's hesitation, he sighed heavily. "Fine, but you stay back when we get there. No heroics." Sarah quickly arranged things with Mrs. Calloway, who seemed unsurprised by her decision. After kissing a sleeping James goodbye and changing into riding clothes, she joined Hank, Miguel, and Tom as they rode out into the night. The line shack was indeed about 10 miles away, nestled in a small canyon that provided natural protection on 3 sides. As they approached cautiously, Sarah could see a faint light in the single window. Nathan's horse was tethered in the shadows of a rocky outcropping nearby. They dismounted at a distance, and Hank led them to where Nathan was keeping watch from behind a fallen log. His surprise at seeing Sarah quickly turned to anger. "What is she doing here?" he demanded of Hank. "Said she was coming whether we liked it or not," Hank replied with a shrug. "Stubborn woman." Nathan turned his glare on Sarah. "This is no place for you," he said in a harsh whisper. "I disagree," Sarah replied calmly, though her heart was racing. "What's the situation?" For a moment, it seemed Nathan might argue further, but practicality won out. "Hardin and his remaining man are inside. They know we're here. Been trading shots for hours, but that cabin's well built. Can't get a clear angle." "Have you tried talking to them?" Sarah asked. "Offering terms," Nathan's expression darkened. "The only terms I'm offering Hardin is a bullet." "And if that means none of us walk away from this?" Sarah challenged. "Is your revenge worth your life, worth leaving James without a father figure again?" The words struck home. She could see it in the way Nathan's jaw tightened. "What would you have me do?" "Let him go, knowing he'll come after us again." "No," Sarah said, "but there might be a better way than a shootout in the dark. Before Nathan could respond, a voice called out from the cabin. "Jameson, you still out there?" "I'm here, Hardin," Nathan shouted back. "And you're not leaving this canyon alive?" "Maybe not," Hardin replied, "but I'll take you with me if I go. How about we settle this between us, man to man, you and me?" Nathan's eyes gleamed in the darkness. "You tried that arrangement with Emily. Forgive me if I don't trust your honor." There was a pause, then Hardin called again, his voice strained. "I'm bleeding bad, Jameson. Not gonna last till morning anyway. Least let me die on my feet." Sarah touched Nathan's arm. "He's trying to draw you out." "I know," Nathan said grimly, "but he's also desperate." And a desperate man makes mistakes. An idea formed in Sarah's mind, dangerous, possibly foolish, but perhaps their best chance to end this without further bloodshed. "Let me help," she whispered. Nathan looked at her sharply. "Absolutely not. Just listen," she insisted. "Hardin knows I can identify him. Let me be the bait. I'll approach from the side, draw his attention. When he shows himself, you'll have your shot." "No," Nathan said flatly. "I won't risk you." "It's not your decision," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her fear. "I lost everything once already. I won't lose you too, not if I can help it." Their eyes locked in silent battle of wills. Finally, Nathan exhaled slowly. "If we do this, we do it my way. You don't move an inch without my signal." "Understood," Sarah nodded, relief and terror mingling in her chest. The plan they devised was simple but perilous. Miguel and Tom would create a distraction at the rear of the cabin. Hank would cover the lone window. Nathan would position himself with a clear shot at the door, while Sarah would call out to Hardin from a protected position, hopefully drawing him into the open. As they moved into position, Nathan caught Sarah's arm, pulling her close for a brief, fierce kiss. "When this is over," he murmured against her lips, "we're getting married. No arguments." Sarah smiled despite the gravity of the situation. "Is that a proposal, Mr. Jameson?" "It's a promise," he replied, his eyes intense. "Now stay safe." The next minutes unfolded like a nightmare. Miguel and Tom began firing at the rear of the cabin, while Sarah, sheltered behind a large boulder, called out to Hardin. "Mr. Hardin, I know you're wounded. We can get you a doctor if you surrender." For a heart-stopping moment, there was no response. Then the cabin door creaked open slightly. "That the green woman?" Hardin's voice called out. "Come where I can see you and maybe we can talk." "I'm not a fool," Sarah replied, "but I don't want more bloodshed. Your man can walk away from this if you give yourself up." Another pause, longer this time. Sarah held her breath, knowing Nathan was waiting for his shot, praying Hardin would show himself. Suddenly, the door burst open and Hardin staggered out, gun raised not toward Sarah's position, but toward where he must have guessed Nathan was hiding. Two shots rang out almost simultaneously. Hardin jerked backward, a red stain blossoming on his chest, while a bullet splintered the rock inches from Nathan's head. Hardin remained standing for a moment, a look of surprise on his face. Then his knees buckled and he collapsed to the ground. "Nathan!" Sarah cried, rushing forward despite their agreement for her to stay put. Nathan emerged from his position, moving cautiously toward Hardin's fallen form, gun still trained on the outlaw. Sarah reached his side, her eyes quickly scanning for injuries and finding none. Hardin was still alive, but barely. Blood bubbled from his lips as he looked up at Nathan. "Should've killed you years ago," he gasped. "Yes," Nathan agreed coldly, "you should have." The outlaw's eyes shifted to Sarah, a hint of recognition in them. "You, from the farm." His voice trailed off as death claimed him. The remaining outlaw surrendered without further resistance, emerging from the cabin with his hands raised. As Miguel and Tom secured him, Sarah found herself trembling with delayed shock and relief. Nathan's arm came around her shoulders, steady and warm. "It's over," he said softly. "He can't hurt anyone else now." Sarah leaned into his strength, the reality of what they had just accomplished washing over her. "Take me home, Nathan," she whispered. "Take me back to James." The ride back to Pinewood Ranch was quiet, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Dawn was breaking as they approached the house, casting the landscape in soft golden light that seemed to promise a new beginning. Mrs. Calloway met them at the door, James awake and fussing in her arms. Sarah gratefully took her son, breathing in his sweet baby scent, while Nathan briefly recounted what had happened. "Thank the Lord you're all safe," Mrs. Calloway said, ushering them inside. "Breakfast is ready and you look like you need it." After eating and seeing to the wounded outlaw, who would be taken to the sheriff later that day, Nathan found Sarah in the parlor. She sat in the rocking chair by the window, James sleeping peacefully in her arms. "He didn't even notice I was gone," she said softly as Nathan approached. "Children are resilient," Nathan replied, crouching beside the chair. "Something we could learn from them, I think." Sarah met his gaze, seeing in it all the emotions she herself was feeling: exhaustion, relief, and something deeper, more profound. "Did you mean what you said, before the shootout?" Nathan took her free hand in his. "Every word. I love you, Sarah, you and James both. I never thought I'd feel this way again after Emily and Lily, but you've shown me that the heart can heal, can grow large enough to hold both grief and joy." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. "I love you too, Nathan. I tried not to, it felt too soon, too complicated. But life out here doesn't wait for convenient timing, does it?" "No," he agreed with a small smile. "It doesn't." He hesitated, then asked, "Do you think Thomas would understand?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "Thomas wanted me to be happy, to give James a good life. He would approve of a man willing to risk everything to protect us." Nathan nodded, satisfied with her answer. Standing, he pulled a small object from his pocket, a simple gold band. "This was my mother's," he explained. "I'd be honored if you would wear it." Sarah's breath caught. "Nathan, we don't have to rush," he assured her. "We can wait as long as you need, but I want you to know that whenever you're ready, this belongs to you." Sarah looked down at James, then back at Nathan, the man who had saved them in more ways than one. The decision wasn't difficult. "I don't need to wait," she said, extending her left hand. "We've already wasted too much time." With a smile that transformed his entire face, Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit as though it had been made for her. "Mrs. Calloway will be pleased," Sarah remarked, admiring the simple band. "She's been hinting for weeks that we should stop dancing around each other." Nathan chuckled. "She's a wise woman. Hank and the boys will be glad too. They've grown rather attached to you and this little fellow." James chose that moment to wake, blinking up at them with curious eyes. Nathan reached out, and this time Sarah didn't hesitate to place her son in his arms. The sight of Nathan holding James with such natural care brought fresh tears to her eyes. "There now," Nathan murmured to the baby. "No need for your mama to cry. Everything's going to be just fine from now on." The next few weeks passed in a blur of preparations. Nathan and Sarah agreed on a simple wedding at the ranch, with Reverend Collins from Willow Creek officiating. Mrs. Calloway threw herself into planning with enthusiasm, recruiting help from neighboring ranches for what was becoming the social event of the season. Sheriff Thompson personally escorted Hardin's surviving man to the territorial prison, returning with news that the governor had issued a commendation for Nathan's role in bringing down one of the region's most notorious outlaws. The recognition seemed to embarrass Nathan, who insisted he had only done what was necessary to protect his family. The word had taken on new meaning for both Nathan and Sarah. Their love had blossomed rapidly once they had stopped fighting it, grounded in mutual respect and shared experiences that many couples might never face in a lifetime together. The night before their wedding, Sarah found Nathan on the porch, staring at the stars. James was asleep in the cradle. They had moved to Nathan's room, soon to be their room. "Having second thoughts?" she asked lightly, joining him at the railing. Nathan shook his head, drawing her close. "Just thinking about how life changes when you least expect it. 3 months ago I was existing, not really living. Then I looked up one morning and saw an exhausted woman with a baby in her arms at my gate." Sarah smiled at the memory. "I was terrified you'd turn us away." "Never," he said simply. "Something inside me recognized you even then. Like my heart knew what my head hadn't figured out yet." Sarah laid her head on his shoulder, content in a way she hadn't believed possible after Thomas's death. "Do you think we'll have more children?" she asked softly. Nathan's arm tightened around her. "I'd like that. James should have brothers and sisters to grow up with. This ranch needs a family to bring it fully to life." "It already has one," Sarah pointed out. "You, me, James, Mrs. Calloway, Hank and the boys, we're already a family." Nathan turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands with a gentleness that still surprised her. Yes, we are, and tomorrow makes it official. Their wedding day dawned clear and crisp, a perfect November morning. Sarah wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Calloway had helped her make, with wildflowers in her hair. Nathan had splurged on a new suit from Willow Creek, looking so handsome that Sarah's breath caught when she first saw him waiting for her by the makeshift altar in the ranch yard. Friends from neighboring ranches, townsfolk from Willow Creek, and even a few passing travelers had gathered to witness their union. James, dressed in a tiny suit that one of the ranch wives had sewn for him, was held by Mrs. Calloway, who beamed with pride throughout the ceremony. Reverend Collins spoke of new beginnings, of love found in unexpected places, and of the resilience of the human heart. As Nathan and Sarah exchanged vows, promising to cherish and protect each other through whatever life might bring, Sarah felt a profound sense of rightness, of having found her place in the world. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the Reverend declared. "Mr. Jameson, you may kiss your bride." Nathan didn't hesitate, pulling Sarah into an embrace that spoke of love, commitment, and promises kept. The gathered crowd cheered, and James, startled by the noise, began to cry a sound that made Nathan and Sarah break their kiss with laughter. "Our son has perfect timing," Nathan remarked, taking James from Mrs. Calloway and bringing him into their embrace. A family complete. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed a small army. Sarah found herself overwhelmed by the genuine warmth and acceptance of the community, many of whom had known Nathan for years but were meeting her for the first time. "They love you already," Nathan observed as they took a rare, quiet moment alone, "though not as much as I do." Sarah squeezed his hand. "I never thought I'd find this kind of happiness again. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I was too afraid to recognize what was happening between us." "I'm a patient man," Nathan replied with a smile, "and some things are worth waiting for." As the evening progressed, Mrs. Calloway took charge of a sleepy James, shooing the newlyweds toward their home with a knowing smile. "Go on now, your boy will be fine with me tonight." Hand in hand, Nathan and Sarah walked back to the house that had become their home, the sounds of the celebration fading behind them. The future stretched before them, not without challenges, certainly, but filled with promise and the certainty that whatever came, they would face it together. 3 years later, Sarah stood on the porch of Pinewood Ranch, watching as Nathan taught 4-year-old James to ride his first pony. The little boy sat proudly on the gentle mare, his face a picture of concentration as he listened to his father's instructions. "Gentle now," Nathan called. "Just like I showed you." "That's it, son," Sarah smiled, one hand resting on her swollen belly where their second child grew. Their daughter would be born before winter set in, another blessing in a life that had become rich with them. The ranch had prospered under their joint care. Nathan's cattle business had expanded, and Sarah had started a small dairy operation that now supplied butter and cheese to stores as far away as Green River. Mrs. Calloway still ruled the kitchen, though she had finally agreed to accept help from a young woman from town who came 3 days a week. Hank, Miguel, and Tom remained loyal hands, joined by 2 others as the ranch grew. They had become extended family, especially to James, who followed the men around whenever he could, soaking up their stories and skills like a sponge. Life wasn't perfect. They had weathered droughts, illness, and the occasional dispute with neighboring ranchers, but the love that had blossomed between them that fateful autumn had only deepened with time and shared experiences. "Mama, look." James called excitedly as he completed a circuit of the corral without assistance. "I'm riding all by myself." "I see you, sweetheart," Sarah called back, her heart full. "You're doing wonderfully." Nathan beamed with pride, and for a moment, Sarah was transported back to that first day, exhausted, frightened, with nothing but her baby and her determination. How far they had come since then. As if sensing her thoughts, Nathan looked up, their eyes meeting across the yard. The love in his gaze was as clear and strong as it had been on their wedding day, a constant in their ever-changing life. Later that evening, with James tucked in bed after demanding 3 stories, Nathan and Sarah sat on the porch swing, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. His arm around her shoulders, her head resting against him, they enjoyed a rare moment of peaceful solitude. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't stopped at your gate that day?" Sarah asked. Nathan considered the question. "I believe some things are meant to be," he said finally. "If not that day, then another. Our paths were destined to cross." Sarah smiled, taking comfort in his certainty. "I think you're right, though I'm glad it was that day. Any later might have been too late." "For both of us," Nathan agreed, his hand gently caressing her shoulder. "You saved me as much as I saved you, Sarah. Never doubt that." A soft cry from the barn caught their attention, a sound they both recognized instantly. "Sounds like one of the new kittens got out again," Sarah observed. "James will be heartbroken if anything happens to them." "I'll check," Nathan offered, rising from the swing. "Wait here." Sarah watched as he crossed the yard to the barn, lantern in hand. Through the open door, she could see him moving among the hay bales, searching for the source of the mewing. After a few minutes, he emerged with a tiny calico kitten cupped in his large hands. "Found the little escapee," he called, walking back toward her. "Fast asleep in the hay, dreaming of mice, no doubt." As Nathan approached, Sarah was struck by the tableau, this strong man cradling the tiny creature with such gentle care, the same tenderness he showed to James and to her. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that no matter what challenges lay ahead, their love would endure. Nathan sat beside her again, the kitten now purring contentedly in his hands. "Shall we bring her inside for the night? James can return her to her mother in the morning." Sarah nodded, leaning over to stroke the kitten's soft fur. A warm bed and a loving home, what more could anyone ask for? Nathan's eyes met hers, filled with understanding of all she wasn't saying. "Nothing more," he agreed softly, "nothing at all." Together, they rose and walked into their home, carrying the sleeping kitten to safety just as Nathan had once carried Sarah and James from danger to the promise of a new life. A life built on love, trust, and the courage to begin again.